The last thing the project manager from O'Doul International said before he vanished from my screen was, "Alex, for the love of God, are you sure this is non-disruptive?" And then silence. Not just the silence of a dropped Microsoft Teams call. This was a deeper, more profound silence. The gentle, humming symphony of my home office, the reassuring whir of the fans in my server rack, the quiet electronic purr of the enterprise-grade switch, the almost imperceptible buzz of data flowing at a glorious 1 gigabit per second, all of it just stopped. My three 4K monitors, which a moment ago had been displaying a cascading waterfall of migration script data, a live network topology map, and the panicked face of the PM, now showed a single, hateful image, a tiny cartoon dinosaur, the icon for no internet. I stared at it. The dinosaur stared back, its pixelated eyes filled with a placid, mocking ignorance. It had no idea of the chaos it represented. It had no idea that it was currently costing O'Doul International approximately $50,000 a minute. "No," I said to the empty room. "No, this isn't happening." My fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory taking over. Ping 8.8.8.8. Request timed out. Ping 1.1.1.1. Request timed out. I tried to ping my own router. Nothing. I couldn't even reach the device 10 feet away from me. This wasn't a DNS issue. This wasn't a provider outage in some distant data center. This was a hard-down event. The signal was gone. The light had gone out of my life. I swiveled in my Herman Miller chair and looked at Betsy, my beautiful, ridiculously overpowered Unify Dream Machine Pro. Her little touchscreen display, usually a calming blue, was now a screaming blood red. "One, disconnected," it accused. The main fiber optic link light on the switch above her was dark. Utterly, terrifyingly dark. "Okay, Betsy," I murmured, walking over and placing a hand on her cool metal chassis. "Don't you do this to me. We've been through too much. Remember that DDoS attack from that botnet in Belarus? We laughed at it. Remember when we pushed 3 terabytes for that offsite backup in under an hour? You were singing." I did the only thing a man in my position could do. I performed the sacred ritual. I unplugged her, counted to 30 with the grim patience of a bomb disposal expert, and plugged her back in. Her fans spun to life. The lights flickered. She went through her boot sequence. And then, the red screen of death returned. This was wrong. This was fundamentally, cosmically wrong. My system doesn't go down. I have redundant power supplies. I have battery backups that could keep this office running for 3 days. My setup is more stable than most small countries. For my connection to die, this completely meant something physical had happened. Something brutal. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my wife, Sarah. "Internet out for you too?" I was trying to file a brief. Then another, and another. It was my neighbor, Tom. "Dude, is your net down? I got kicked out of my Warzone match." A cold dread, colder than any server room, washed over me. It wasn't just me. I disconnected my phone from the dead Wi-Fi and switched to the blessed sanctuary of 5G cellular data. I opened the one place where truth, lies, and utter madness converge in a glorious suburban train wreck. The Serenity Springs Estates Community Facebook group. It was, as expected, a nuclear meltdown in real time. Cheryl P. posted, "Is anyone else's internet down? My little Brayden can't watch his Coca-Melon and he's starting to get fussy." Mark R., a man who took his smart home way too seriously, was in full panic mode. "My Philips Hue lights are stuck on magenta mood. My thermostat is unresponsive. And my smart fridge just tried to order 70 gallons of milk. This is a catastrophe." And then, like a pristine marble monument in the middle of a garbage fire, was a post from our glorious leader, the HOA president herself, Brenda Larson. posted with a picture of a perfectly manicured rose bush. A friendly reminder to all residents that service provider issues should be directed to the provider's customer service line, not this community forum. Please keep this space clear for official HOA business. On that note, Janice, your lawn is a 1/4 inch above the regulation 3-inch height. You have been cited. Have a serene day. I read Brenda's post, and a dark suspicion began to bloom in my mind. Brenda, a woman who once tried to fine me because my garbage can was a shade of forest green inconsistent with the approved onyx black, had been on a crusade for weeks. Her target? A series of small orange utility markers that the fiber company had planted along the main easement. An easement that ran right along the edge of her property. An easement where she grew her award-winning petunias. No, I whispered to myself, the gears turning. She wouldn't. But I knew she would. In the holy war for aesthetic conformity, Brenda recognized no Geneva Convention. I slipped on a pair of sneakers, grabbed my phone, and headed outside, leaving the tomb-like silence of my office behind. I wasn't just a man trying to get back to work. I was an investigator now. This was a crime scene. The moment I stepped outside, the strangeness of the situation hit me full force. Serenity Springs Estates is usually a place of manufactured tranquility. You hear the gentle hum of electric lawnmowers, the distant, cheerful ding of an ice cream truck, the rhythmic thwack of a tennis ball from the community courts. Today, there was only silence. A heavy, anxious silence. People were milling about on their perfectly paved driveways, holding their phones up like they were searching for a signal from a lost civilization. They looked like zombies from a George A. Romero movie, if the zombies were all dressed in Lululemon and Tommy Bahama. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and existential dread. But it was the sight at the end of our street that truly set off the alarm bells in my head. The Serenity Springs Police Substation. It was a small brick building, more of a glorified office than a real station, but it was always lit up, a symbol of order in our beige paradise. Today, it was dark. No lights in the windows. The digital sign out front, which usually flashed reminders about speeding or upcoming community bake sales, was blank. This had escalated. This wasn't about Braden missing his cocomelon anymore. I walked down the street, my steps feeling unnaturally loud in the quiet. I followed the line of the utility easement, marked by those little orange flags that Brenda so despised. The path led directly to the border of her property, a pristine stretch of lawn that looked like it had been trimmed with surgical scissors, bordered by an immaculate bed of prize-winning petunias. And right in the middle of those petunias was a gash in the earth. A freshly dug trench about 3 feet long. Lying beside it, gleaming in the morning sun, was the murder weapon and the victim, all in one. A thick, bright orange fiber optic cable, and it had been cut. I leaned in closer. This was no clumsy accident by a landscaper. A shovel would have mangled it, frayed the edges. This was a single, clean, deliberate snip, right through the armored sheathing, through the Kevlar strengthening fibers, and through the delicate glass core within. It was an execution, performed with a pair of heavy-duty shears. I could almost see the ghost of a satisfied, self-righteous smile hanging in the air above it. "You magnificent crazy bastard," I muttered, a grim smile on my own face. "You actually did it." I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures, making sure to get the pristine cut, the disturbed flower bed, and the corner of Brenda's house in the frame. I was documenting evidence. This felt important. As I was zooming in on the severed strands of glass, a car crunched to a halt on the asphalt behind me. I turned to see a Serenity Springs police cruiser, a young officer who looked like he had barely started shaving, stepped out. His name tag read Miller. He looked flustered, his hand hovering uncertainly near his sidearm. "Sir, please step away from the, wire," he said, his voice a full octave higher than he probably intended. "It's a fiber-optic trunk line," I corrected him, unable to help myself. "Or, it was a trunk line, and I think I know why our entire neighborhood, including your dark little substation over there, just got punted back to 1995. I gestured with my thumb towards the lifeless police building. Miller's eyes widened. "Our what? Our phones are down, the computers are off. Sergeant Davis is about to have an aneurysm." As if on cue, a second cruiser, this one a bigger, angrier-looking SUV, pulled up with a squeal of tires. The man who got out was the polar opposite of Miller. He was a slab of granite in a police uniform, with a salt-and-pepper flat-top haircut and a face that looked like it had been carved from a block of pure cynicism. This had to be Sergeant Davis. "What's going on here, Miller?" he barked, his voice like gravel grinding together. His eyes swept over the scene and landed on me. He took in my tech company t-shirt, my cargo shorts, and the phone in my hand, and his expression soured even further. I could see the gears turning in his head. Hacker, nerd, probably lives in his mom's basement. 2 out of 3 wasn't bad. "This guy here says he knows why we're down, Sarge," Miller said, pointing at me. "I'm the guy who pays a ridiculous HOA fee to live here and currently has no internet," I said, stepping forward. I pointed down at the cable. "This is the cause. Someone took a pair of shears to the main data line for the entire subdivision." Davis squinted at the orange cable as if it had personally insulted him. "So call the cable company. Why are you messing with it? Is this some kind of protest?" I had to physically restrain myself from sighing. "First," I said, holding up a finger, "it's fiber, not cable. There's a difference. It's light, not electricity. Think of it as a superhighway versus a dirt road. Second, calling them is a fantastic idea if you want to navigate a phone tree for 45 minutes and then be told a repair crew might be available sometime next Tuesday. Third," I held up a third finger and made sure I had his full attention. "And you might want to pay very close attention to this part, Sergeant. Your station is on this line, that's why it's dark, which means you have no computers, no access to the 911 dispatch system, no way to run plates or check warrants from the state and federal databases. Right now, your entire operation is running on a prayer and whatever's left on your cell phone batteries. You're not just offline, you're blind." The color drained from Miller's face. Sergeant Davis's jaw tightened. The cynicism in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of genuine alarm. He looked from my face to the dead station, then back to the severed cable at his feet. The full weight of the situation was finally dawning on him. This wasn't an inconvenience. It was a full-blown public safety emergency, delivered courtesy of a pair of gardening shears and a pathological obsession with petunias. The inside of the Serenity Springs police substation smelled like stale coffee and desperation. A few green, glowing emergency lights cast long, spooky shadows across the room, illuminating desks covered in useless, dark-screened monitors and silent phones. It was a digital ghost town. Sergeant Davis was pacing behind his desk, his personal cell phone pressed to his ear, his face a thundercloud. "What do you mean you can't get a clear signal?" he roared into the phone. "I'm standing in the middle of Serenity Springs, not the dark side of the moon. No, I can't get on the computer and file a ticket. The computers are what's broken, you idiot." He slammed the phone down with a final, guttural curse. Officer Miller, trying to be helpful, was just making things worse. He scurried over to the sergeant's desk, holding a notepad where he'd clearly been trying to write down what I'd told him. "Sergeant," Miller began, his voice trembling slightly. "He says the optical terminal is unlinked, and the provider's main trunk has been terminated." Davis glared at him. "Speak English, Miller, for the last time. Is it a bomb? Is it some kind of coordinated cyber attack? Terrorism?" I had been lingering in the doorway, observing the beautiful chaos. I decided it was time to make my entrance. "It's worse," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "It's bureaucracy, combined with suburban madness. You've got a better chance of seeing God than you do of getting an ISP crew with fusion splicing equipment out here before Thursday." They both turned to look at me. Davis's eyes were narrowed slits of pure frustration. "And you are?" he growled. "Alex Evans. I live 3 doors down. I'm a network architect." I paused for effect. "Look, I can get you back online." Davis let out a short, bark-like laugh. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. "Oh, you can? And how are you gonna do that, computer man? You got some magic tape in your pocket? Gonna sprinkle some pixie dust on the wire?" I smiled. It was the smile I reserved for executives who asked if we could just make the cloud faster. "No," I said calmly. "I have administrative access to a Federal Continuity of Operations Network, COG. Think of it as the Internet's panic room. The Department of Homeland Security has a web of redundant, high-bandwidth satellite and terrestrial backhauls for situations just like this one. Natural disasters, major infrastructure failures." I gestured vaguely at the world outside the window. "Tuh. Or when an HOA president decides to go rogue with a pair of hedge clippers." Miller was staring at me, his mouth slightly agape. "A federal network? Is that legal for you to use?" "It's break glass in case of emergency legal," I explained. "The thing is, your station is already a designated point of presence, or POP. You have the physical connection. It's a requirement for municipal services in a community this size, but you don't have the hardware or the software protocols enabled to fail over to it automatically. It's a manual switch, a switch I know how to flip." I pushed off the doorframe. "All I need is 5 minutes in your server closet, your word that you'll look the other way, and for you to pretend you didn't see what I'm about to do." A tense silence filled the room. Davis stared at me, his mind clearly warring with itself. Decades of by-the-book police procedure were screaming at him to throw me out. But the dead, silent room around him was screaming louder. He was the captain of a sinking ship, and I had just shown up with the only lifeboat. "You touch anything that messes up my evidence logs, my case files, anything at all," he finally said, his voice low and dangerous, "and I will personally throw you in a cell so fast your head will spin. You'll be explaining network architecture to a cellmate named Bubba." "Fair enough," I said with a nod. "It's a deal. But when I get you back online, you owe me. You're going to march over to Brenda's house and have a little chat with her. And I get to be there. I want to see her face." A flicker of something, maybe grim satisfaction, passed over Davis's face. He grunted. It was the closest he would ever come to a smile. "Fine," he conceded. "Miller, go with him. Babysit. If he so much as looks at a file, tase him." Miller gulped, his eyes darting between me and the sergeant. Roger that, Sarge." I grinned. "Don't worry, officer. The only thing I'll be zapping is your network switch." The server closet at the Serenity Springs police substation was less of a closet and more of a vertical coffin. It was cramped, smelled of dust and overheated plastic, and was lit by a single, flickering fluorescent bulb. A rat's nest of blue and gray Ethernet cables spilled from the walls and ceiling, a testament to 2 decades of neglect and quick fixes. Officer Miller hovered nervously in the doorway behind me, casting a long, wavering shadow. "Oh, my sweet Lord," I whispered, taking in the scene. My professional soul wept. It's a graveyard. Stacked in a cheap, wobbly rack were ghosts of technologies past. A Dell PowerEdge server from 2008, its fans grinding with arthritic protest. A Netgear switch that looked like it had been salvaged from a high school computer lab. I was pretty sure I saw a dial-up modem, It was a digital atrocity. "Is this bad?" Miller asked, his voice echoing slightly in the small space. "Bad?" I scoffed, pulling my own ruggedized laptop from my backpack. "Officer, this isn't bad." "This is a cry for help. This is what happens when you let the lowest bidder handle your IT for 20 years. I'm surprised you guys could run solitaire, let alone a criminal database." I got to work. Miller watched me as if I were performing a strange and arcane ritual, which, in a way, I was. First, I located the station's primary network switch. It was warm to the touch, a bad sign. I traced the dead fiber optic line from the wall plate and unplugged its connector from the port. It was like pulling a life support plug from a patient who was already dead. Next, my eyes scanned the switch panel. And there it was, just as the public infrastructure blueprints had indicated. A single port, set apart from the others, covered by a bright red plastic dust cap. A tiny label above it, almost faded to illegibility, read, DHS COG E-Link. This was it, the secret passage, the gateway to the good stuff. This port didn't lead to the local ISP. It led to a hardened, shielded conduit that snaked its way to a discreet satellite dish on the roof. I unplugged the dust cap, blew on it for good measure, and plugged the station's main fiber line into this new port. Nothing happened, as expected. The physical link was there, but the port wasn't provisioned. It was asleep. Time to wake it up. I popped open my laptop. My own connection was long gone, so it was time for Plan B. I tethered my laptop to my phone's 5G signal, the last bastion of connectivity in this digital wasteland. A black window with green text popped onto my screen. A secure shell, or SSH, terminal. "What is all that?" Miller whispered from the doorway, mesmerized by the cursor blinking in the dark void. "Is that code?" "I'm dialing a phone number," I said, my fingers dancing across the keys. "Shish Axivans at gw.dhs.net P2200. A very, very secure phone number." A prompt appeared. Password. I typed in my ridiculously long passphrase. Another prompt appeared. Enter YubiKey 2FA code. I pulled the small key-shaped device from my keychain and plugged it into my laptop's USB-C port. I tapped its gold disc. A long string of characters filled the screen, and I hit Enter. I was in. The terminal prompt changed. I was now inside a gateway server, a digital lobby in a very secure, very secret building somewhere deep in the hills of Virginia. From here, I had to hop through 2 more layers of security, a process that involved authenticating my credentials against a different server in Colorado and passing a cryptographic challenge response test. To Miller, it just looked like I was typing gibberish. "I'm telling a very powerful, very expensive computer in a bunker in Virginia to wake up and pay attention to you guys," I narrated, partly for his benefit and partly for my own. It's like a long-distance booty call for data. You have to whisper all the right sweet nothings to get it interested. Finally, I arrived at my destination. The command line interface for the regional COG network switch. I had the power. I typed the commands, my fingers moving with a speed and confidence that came from years of doing this. Enable, configure, terminal, interface GI 1/0/48. The port number for the DHS link. Description ***. Emergency activation. Serenity Springs Substation. Local infrastructure. Sabotage ***. No shutdown. IP address DHCP. Exit. I hit the final Enter key. On my screen, I started a simple timer script. Now, we waited for the network to do its thing, for the request to travel to the satellite, get authenticated, for the switch here to be provisioned, and for the data to start flowing. The technical term is propagation delay. 1 minute passed. Sergeant Davis's impatient voice echoed from the main room. Anything yet, computer man? Patience is a virtue, Sergeant, I called back. Greatness takes time. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. The little green light on the DHS port on the switch remained a stubbornly dead orange. Miller was shifting his weight, the skepticism returning to his face. 3 minutes and 50 seconds. My own heart was beating a little faster. Come on, baby, talk to me. Then, at 3 minutes and 58 seconds, it happened. The orange light flickered, once, twice, and then it turned a solid, brilliant, beautiful green. A second later, the other lights on the switch connected to the station's internal network began to flash frantically, like a string of Christmas lights having a seizure. Data was flowing. And we have propagation, I said, a triumphant grin spreading across my face. 3, 2, 1. The effect in the main room was immediate and dramatic. The overhead fluorescent lights, which had been off, flickered to life as the building's network-connected power management system came back online. The monitors on the desks all lit up in unison, displaying their familiar login prompts. A laser printer in the corner, silent for hours, whirred to life and began spitting out a huge backlog of queued print jobs, the paper cascading onto the floor. Sergeant Davis, who had been staring at his blank screen with the expression of a man defeated by life, now just stared, dumbfounded, as the familiar logo of his operating system appeared. He slowly reached out and touched the screen, as if to confirm it was real. He looked up, his eyes wide, and met my gaze through the server closet doorway. Miller, standing behind me, let out a slow, astonished breath. Did you just fix the whole police department with your laptop?" he whispered in awe. I leaned back in the cramped closet, closing my laptop with a satisfying click. "I rerouted you through $1 billion federal backup network that's normally reserved for surviving a nuclear apocalypse," I said, savoring the moment. "So, yeah, just try not to use it all streaming Netflix during your lunch break. I think DHS frowns on that." With the station humming back to life, the atmosphere shifted from one of panicked despair to bewildered efficiency. Cops were logging into their computers, the dispatch radio was crackling with voices, and the printer was still chugging away like it was trying to single-handedly deforest Canada. Sergeant Davis now looked at me with a completely new expression. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a healthy dose of fear and grudging respect. He was a man who understood blunt force, and I had just hit his problem with the digital equivalent of a tactical nuclear strike. True to his word, he picked up his now working desk phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's Davis. I need a crew out at Serenity Springs. No, not for a bust. I need a construction guy. Someone who knows digging. Yeah, right now it's an infrastructure issue." An hour later, a beat-up Ford F-150 that looked like it had personally survived several apocalypses pulled up to the curb. The logo on the side, faded and caked with mud, read "Digs a Lot Construction." A large man with a magnificent beer belly, a coffee-stained shirt, and the easygoing confidence of someone who had seen it all hopped out. This was Dave. Davis, Miller, and I met him at the crime scene, Brenda's petunia bed. I had been forced to stick around as their technical consultant, which mostly meant I stood there trying to look useful while enjoying the show. "All right, Sarge, what's the emergency?" Dave asked, taking a sip from a giant thermos. He looked at the severed orange cable on the ground. "Oh." He knelt down, his knees cracking audibly. He examined the cut for no more than 5 seconds. "Oh, yeah," he said, nodding with the authority of a seasoned pro. "That's a clean cut. Did that with a pair of $50 anvil loppers from Home Depot. See the pinch marks on the sheathing here? No way that was a shovel. A shovel mangles." This was personal. He pointed a thick finger at the soft dirt of the flower bed. "And look here. Footprints, small ones, size 7 maybe. See the tread pattern? That's a woman's gardening clog. I'd bet my lunch on it." Davis looked at me. I just shrugged and smiled. Dave, the digs-a-lot guy, had just done more effective forensic work in 30 seconds than a whole CSI team. "All right," Davis grunted. "Let's go have a chat." The four of us, a grim-faced sergeant, a nervous rookie, a smug network architect, and a folksy construction expert, made our way up Brenda's perfectly swept walkway. It felt like the weirdest posse in history. Davis knocked firmly on the door. A moment later, it swung open to reveal Brenda herself. She was holding a small, elegant watering can, and she had a beatific smile on her face, the smile of a benevolent ruler surveying her perfect kingdom. "Sergeant," she chirped, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I was just about to file another report about the Hendersons' unapproved wind chimes. The dissonance is simply dreadful for the neighborhood's feng shui." "Ma'am," Davis began, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, "we need to talk to you about the internet outage." Brenda's smile didn't falter. She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that silly thing. A necessary inconvenience, I'm afraid. The provider, in their infinite sloppiness, ran that hideous orange wire right through my prize-winning Crimson Glory petunias. It was a clear and egregious violation of HOA Bylaw 17, Section C, Paragraph 4, Aesthetic Cohesion of Utility Pathways." She puffed out her chest slightly. "I simply removed the offending article." She said it with such pride, such unshakable conviction, as if she had just saved us all from a dragon. "You moved the main fiber optic trunk for a community of 5,000 people and the emergency services network for the local police department," I interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. Brenda's gaze shifted to me. Her eyes, which were a pale, watery blue, narrowed with disdain. She looked me up and down, taking in my t-shirt and shorts. "And who are you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she had just found something unpleasant on the bottom of her shoe. "He's a witness," Davis cut in before I could offer a sarcastic reply. He took a step forward, his shadow falling over her. "Ma'am, you do understand that what you did isn't just an HOA violation, right? This isn't about petunias. What you did is a felony, willful destruction of critical communications infrastructure." He let the words hang in the air. "It's a federal offense." The change was breathtaking. It was like watching a dam break. Brenda's smile didn't just fade, it shattered. The color drained from her face, replaced by a blotchy, panicked red. The watering can slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the pristine porch. She stared at Davis, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "A felony?" she stammered, her voice a squeak. A federal offense? That's absurd. I was upholding community standards. I was protecting the neighborhood's property values. I am the president. I am the law of Serenity Springs Estates." Her voice rose to a shrill shriek on the last sentence. A few of the neighbors, who had been pretending not to watch, were now openly staring from their windows and doorways, their phones held up to record the unfolding drama. I leaned over to Miller, who looked like he was witnessing an exorcism. "Get your popcorn ready," I whispered. Brenda's meltdown was truly a sight to behold. She launched into a frantic, rambling tirade about bylaws, aesthetic harmony, the proper shade of beige for mailboxes, and how she was the victim here. Davis just stood there, his face an unreadable mask of weary patience, and let her burn herself out. When she finally paused to take a ragged breath, he spoke. "Brenda Larson," he said, his voice carrying with official finality. You are under arrest for the violation of U.S. Code Title 18, Section 1362, Destruction of a Communication Line. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all the suburban madness he'd ever witnessed, he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Brenda stared at them as if they were venomous snakes, and let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob, as the reality of her situation finally, irrevocably, crashed down upon her. A day later, I was back in my natural habitat. The gentle hum of the server rack was my background music. The glorious, steady green lights on my network switch blinked in a soothing rhythm. The ISP crew, a sullen-looking pair of guys who seemed deeply unimpressed with the whole situation, were outside, painstakingly fusion splicing the thousands of tiny glass fibers in the main trunk line back together. My own internet was still being piped in from a DHS satellite somewhere over the horizon. It felt exclusive. I was on the phone with Sarah, recounting the saga. She had been getting updates via text, but hearing the full story was something else entirely. "Okay, let me just get this straight," she said, her voice a mixture of amusement and lawyerly concern. "To solve an internet outage, you illegally accessed a secure Department of Homeland Security network, became the de facto IT department for the entire Serenity Springs police force, and instigated the arrest of the HOA president on charges that could be construed as domestic terrorism." "It was more like willful destruction of property. Technically," I corrected. "But let's not get bogged down in the legal minutiae. The important thing is, my latency is back down to 4 milliseconds, and I was able to finish the O'Doul data migration. They only lost about $3 million in productivity, which, for them, is a rounding error." "You're unbelievable," she laughed. "I leave you alone for one morning?" My other line beeped. It was a call from the police substation. I told Sarah I'd call her back. It was Officer Miller. "Alex? Hey, just wanted to let you know, things are crazy over here," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "The story is all over the precinct. They're calling you the fiber god." "Some of the guys want to get a plaque made for the server closet," I groaned. "Please don't do that." "Oh, and the Facebook group," he went on, oblivious to my pain. "You're a legend. You're like the folk hero who took down the evil queen. There's a movement. They want to nominate you for the now vacant position of HOA president." A chill went down my spine. That was my actual, literal nightmare. Being in charge of approving mailbox colors and mediating disputes over lawn height. "Miller, I need you to do me a favor. If anyone asks, tell them I'm moving to Antarctica." Before he could respond, my doorbell rang. "Gotta go, Miller. Good luck with all that." I hung up and went to the door. Standing on my porch were 2 men. They were both in their 40s, both wearing identical, nondescript dark suits that screamed federal agents louder than a bald eagle holding a copy of the Constitution. They did not look happy. "Alex Evans?" the one on the left asked. He had a sharp, angular face and tired eyes. "That's me," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Let me guess. You're not here to sell me cookies." "I'm Agent Foster, FBI," said the one on the left. "This is Agent Cardenas, Department of Homeland Security." "DHS," I said with a nod. "Big fan of your work. Your satellite network has fantastic uptime. A little bit of latency on the uplink, but the bandwidth is solid." Cardenas, the DHS agent, did not smile. "Mr. Evans, your access logs from yesterday afternoon lit up about a dozen threat matrices we have running in Quantico. We thought a foreign state actor was attempting to hijack a municipal communications hub for a denial-of-service attack. Then we cross-referenced the source IP with ISP records," Foster added, his voice a low monotone. "And we saw it came from a residential address in this subdivision. We were confused. You bypassed 3 layers of security protocols that my department was assured were rock solid." I couldn't resist. That's because your authentication handshake is vulnerable to a side-channel timing attack, I said matter-of-factly. You can infer the validity of parts of the key by measuring the server response time. It's a well-known vulnerability. You should really patch that. Anyway, can I help you gentlemen with something? They stared at me for a long, silent moment. I could see them mentally recalibrating. They had come here expecting to interrogate a malicious hacker, a cyber terrorist. Instead, they got a bored-looking nerd in cargo shorts giving them unsolicited and entirely correct security advice. "Can we come in, Mr. Evans?" Cardenas finally asked, his tone shifting from accusatory to wearily curious. They spent the next 2 hours in my living room, debriefing me. I walked them through the entire sequence of events, from the discovery of the cut cable to the commands I typed in the server closet. They were simultaneously horrified that I had gotten in so easily and deeply impressed by how I'd done it. I ended up drawing a network diagram on the back of a pizza box to explain the failover process. In the end, they concluded that my actions, while technically highly illegal, fell into a bizarre legal gray area. I hadn't acted with malicious intent. In fact, I had restored a critical service. Prosecuting me would be a public relations nightmare and would expose their own network's vulnerabilities. They made me sign a stack of non-disclosure agreements and gave me a stern, official warning to never, ever, under any circumstances, do that again. As they were leaving, Agent Cardenas paused at the door. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a heavy, ornate challenge coin. He pressed it into my hand. It had the DHS seal on one side and a satellite on the other. "For your technical feedback," he said with the ghost of a smile, "don't spend it all in one place." I watched them get into their black sedan and drive away. I looked at the ridiculous coin in my hand and started to laugh. A week later, a fragile peace had settled over Serenity Springs estates. The new fiber trunk line was buried, encased in concrete, and marked with signs that threatened prosecution by every federal agency short of the Space Force. Brenda was out on bail, facing a mountain of legal bills and the icy glares of every neighbor she passed. The HOA was in a state of headless chaos, which was a marked improvement over its previous state of tyrannical order. Life, for me, was good. I was back in my office, basking in the warm glow of my monitors and the pure, unadulterated speed of my private internet connection. My world was back in balance. That evening, as I was wrapping up my work, there was a knock at the door. It was Sergeant Davis, out of uniform, wearing a polo shirt and jeans. He looked like a different person without the badge and the perpetual scowl. He was holding a bottle of what looked like very expensive single malt scotch. He wordlessly handed it to me. "For your help," he grunted. It was clearly a struggle for him to be civil. "Thanks, Sergeant," I said, taking the bottle. "You know, for a minute there in the beginning, I really thought you were going to arrest me." He almost smiled. "Still might, but my computer boots in under 30 seconds for the first time in 5 years, and Miller has stopped asking me what a gigabyte is. So for now, we're even." He gave a curt nod and walked back to his car, leaving me on the porch with the bottle of whiskey. It was the most touching gesture of gratitude I had ever received. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of Davis's peace offering. The scotch was smooth and smoky, the taste of a crisis averted. I sat in my Herman Miller chair, my sanctuary restored, and did something I knew I would regret. I opened my laptop and navigated to the neighborhood Facebook group. The digital town square was still buzzing. The threads about Brenda's arrest had thousands of comments, but it was the post pinned to the top of the page that caught my eye. It was a poll, created by my neighbor Tom from down the street. "Who should be our new HOA president?" There was only one option listed. Alex the Fiber God Evans. It had 317 votes. I stared at the screen, at my own name, and took a long, slow sip of whiskey. My greatest victory had created my worst nightmare. I had saved the village, and now they wanted to make me the mayor. I slammed the laptop shut. "Nope," I said to the quiet room. "Not my circus. Not my monkeys." I walked over to the window and looked out at the perfectly manicured street. Across the way, a new family who had just moved in were out on their lawn. The husband was hammering something into the grass. It was a bright pink plastic flamingo, hideously, gloriously, defiantly pink. A clear violation of at least 4 different HOA bylaws. I watched as he adjusted it to the perfect, tacky angle. A new battle was brewing in Serenity Springs. A new threat to the aesthetic cohesion was rising. But the green lights on my network switch were blinking steadily. My connection was stable. And for now, that was all that mattered. I took another sip of scotch and smiled. Let them have their flamingo wars. I had a network to architect,